It was a cold afternoon. The sky outside was gray, and the wind blew softly through the empty streets. Inside the huge toy store, lights were bright, colors were everywhere, and laughter filled the air. Children ran down the aisles, holding toys, smiling and playing. But one boy didn't smile. His name was Troy. He was just 9 years old, small and skinny, with big sad eyes. He wore old shoes with holes in them and a sweater that was too small for him. His jeans were dirty at the knees. His face looked tired and his hands were cold. Troy walked slowly into the toy store. He had no money in his pocket, not even a single coin. But he wasn't here to steal anything. He just wanted to look, just to feel like a normal kid. As he stepped inside, the warmth of the store touched his skin. He looked around quietly, hoping no one would notice him. He had been here before, many times, but never bought anything. He just liked to dream. He walked straight to the superhero aisle. That's where his favorite toy was. Mega Falcon, the strongest action hero on TV. Troy stood in front of the shelf, his eyes shining as he looked at the bright red and silver. Figure inside the box. He can fly, fight, and protect people, Troy whispered to himself. Just like I want to. He reached out slowly and gently picked up the box. He held it like something precious. His hands shook a little. For a moment, he forgot everything. His hunger, his loneliness, even the cold. But not everyone was happy to see him there. Behind one of the shelves, a store worker named Miss Karen was watching him closely. She was in her mid-40s, wore a stiff uniform, and had a look of dislike on her face. She had seen Troy come in before. She didn't like poor kids wandering around, as she always said. She stepped out from behind the shelf and walked straight to him, her heels clicking loudly. "What do you think you're doing?" she asked sharply. Troy jumped. The toy almost slipped from his hand. I was just looking," he said in a soft voice. "Well, this is not a museum," she snapped. "You don't get to play with toys unless you're buying them." Sorry," Troy whispered, quickly placing the toy back on the shelf. "You don't belong here," she continued, loud enough for a few customers nearby to hear. "Go home, kid. Don't waste people's time." Troy didn't say a word. His face turned red. He kept his head down and started walking away. His eyes filled with tears. The world around him became blurry. He passed happy kids and smiling parents, but no one looked at him. No one asked if he was okay. He reached a corner of the store and sat down quietly on a small bench. He wiped his face with his sleeve. He didn't want to cry, but he couldn't stop. Why was it so hard just to look at a toy? Behind him, Miss Karen was still talking loudly to another worker. "Kids like that ruin the place," she said. "Always dirty, always poor, always hanging around with nothing." Troy heard every word. He hugged himself tightly and looked down at his old shoes. He wished his mom was still here. She used to take him to this store on his birthday. But ever since she got sick and passed away, things were never the same. His dad worked all day and night just to pay rent. There was never any extra money for toys. But Troy never complained. He just kept dreaming. Then, suddenly, something happened. Outside, a long black car pulled up right in front of the toy store. It was big, shiny, and expensive. People near the window stopped talking and looked out. A few kids ran to the glass. The door of the car opened slowly. A man stepped out. He was tall, strong, and wore sunglasses. He had a clean black coat and a serious look on his face. People started whispering. A woman gasped. A little boy screamed, "It's him! It's him!" Troy looked up, confused. He stood up slowly and walked toward the window with the others. The man took off his glasses and smiled. His face was kind but powerful. The whole store fell silent, because standing outside the toy store, looking right through the glass, was Will Smith. Troy stood frozen near the glass window, his eyes wide open. Will Smith was really there, right outside the store. The famous actor and star, the hero from the movies, the man Troy had seen on screen 100 times. Will smiled at. A few people standing outside waved, and then walked straight toward the store's entrance. Inside, people started whispering. Phones came out. A few teenagers ran toward the door, excited. Troy stepped back quickly. He didn't want to be seen. He felt dirty, small, and out of place. As Will Smith entered the store, the door made a soft bell sound. Everyone looked at him. Even the cashiers paused what they were doing. But while everyone else stared at the celebrity, Troy was walking away quietly. He didn't want more attention. His cheeks still burned from what Miss Karen said earlier. He walked to another aisle and sat down behind a tall shelf full of board games. His head dropped. He felt like crying again. All he wanted was to look at that one superhero toy. Just for a minute. Was that too much to ask? Meanwhile, Miss Karen was still in the action. Figure aisle. She noticed a few people whispering and turned around. Then she saw him, Will Smith, walking down the aisle with a calm smile. Her face went pale. She quickly fixed her hair and stood up straight. Will greeted a few kids and bent down to sign an autograph for a young boy. He laughed softly, asking the boy's name. "Oh, wow," said Karen, forcing a smile. "Mr. Smith, what a surprise." Will looked up politely. "Hey, nice to meet you." "I'm Karen," she said quickly. "I work here. If you need anything at all, I'll help you." Will nodded. "Thanks." But then his smile slowly faded. He noticed something on the shelf. The Mega Falcon toy box was placed sideways, a little different from the others. He picked it up and turned to Karen. "Did someone just look at this?" he asked. Karen stiffened. Yes. Some poor kid came in again. He comes here sometimes and touches things. But don't worry, I sent him away." Will looked at her for a moment, then slowly asked, "You sent him away, just for looking?" Karen forced a laugh. "Well, he doesn't buy anything. He's always in the way. We run a clean store here." Will's face became serious. "And what's wrong with looking?" Karen blinked. "Well, people like him." "People like who?" Will asked, his voice calm but firm. Karen hesitated. She suddenly realized a few people had stopped nearby. Some were listening. One teen even had their phone camera out. Will didn't say anything more. He just placed the toy back on the shelf and started walking. "Wait," Karen called out nervously. "Is something wrong?" But Will didn't answer. He walked past her, heading toward the back of the store, toward the board game aisle. There, behind the tall shelves, he found Troy. The small boy was sitting on the floor, his head down, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. Will stopped. He knelt down quietly and spoke in a soft voice. "Hey, little man. You okay?" Troy looked up slowly and gasped. His mouth opened, but no words came out. His eyes were full of shock. You're Will Smith," he whispered. Will smiled. "That's me, and you're Troy, right?" Troy's eyes widened. How do you know my name?" Will pointed to the name patch on Troy's old backpack, lying beside him. "Lucky guess," he said kindly. Troy tried to sit up straight. He looked nervous and a little embarrassed. "I didn't steal anything," he said quickly. "I just wanted to look at the toy." "I know," Will said gently. "I believe you." Troy's lips trembled. "She yelled at me. She said I don't belong here." Will's smile disappeared. His eyes grew serious. "Don't ever let someone tell you that," he said. "You belong anywhere your heart wants to go." Just then, the store manager came running over. His face was red and he looked scared. "Mr. Smith, I had no idea you were coming. Please let me explain." Will stood up slowly and looked the manager in the eye. "Nothing to explain," he said. "I saw everything I needed." Though, manager stammered, We can give you a discount or a gift. Free shopping, maybe?" Will didn't respond. He turned back to Troy and said, "Come with me." Troy stood up slowly, unsure of what was happening. Will placed a hand on his shoulder. The store was full of whispers. Everyone watched as Will Smith walked side by side with little Troy. His hand rested gently on the boy's shoulder, as if protecting him. The workers stopped what they were doing. Some shoppers pulled out their phones. The store had gone quiet. Will walked slowly toward the front. The store manager followed behind, looking nervous. Miss Karen stood frozen in the action figure aisle, her face pale. She knew something bad was coming. Troy didn't understand what was happening. He just looked around with wide eyes. He had never stood next to a famous person before. He had. Never had anyone defend him before. As they reached the center of the store, Will stopped and looked around. He could see the people watching. Some of them were smiling nervously. Others just stared. Then calmly, Will reached into his long coat and pulled out his phone. Troy looked up. "Are you calling someone?" Will smiled slightly. "No, I'm going live." He opened Instagram and tapped a button. His face came on the screen, then he pointed the camera down to Troy. "This is Troy," he said clearly. "He came to this store today to look at a toy. That's it. Just to look. But someone decided that because of the way he looks, or the clothes he wears, he didn't belong here." People in the store gasped. Miss Karen took a step forward. "Excuse me, Mr. Smith. I didn't mean—" Will raised his hand to stop her. "Let me finish." He turned the camera back to his face. "Every child deserves respect. Every person deserves kindness. You don't need money to be treated like a human being." More people gathered now. Phones were recording. Some shoppers nodded quietly. Will continued. "It broke my heart to see this little man crying behind a shelf, all because someone thought he wasn't good enough to hold a toy." Karen's voice shook. "Sir, I was just doing my job." Will turned his camera to her. "And your job is to shame a child?" Karen's lips trembled. She didn't know what to say. The store manager stepped forward quickly. "We are very sorry, Mr. Smith. This was not right. We promise this won't happen again." Will turned. The camera back to Troy. The boy stood still, his small hands folded together, still unsure why a famous star was standing up for him. "Do you want to say something?" Will asked softly. Troy hesitated. Then he looked into the camera and said in a quiet voice, "I just wanted to be like Mega Falcon. He helps people." Will smiled gently. "You already are like him." The comment section on the live video was blowing up. Thousands of people had joined in minutes. Messages filled the screen. "That boy is so brave. This breaks my heart. Will, thank you for speaking up. Fire that worker. Where can we send toys for Troy?" Karen turned and walked away quickly, hiding her face. Will ended the live video and placed his phone back in his coat. He knelt down again beside Troy and said, "You know what I think?" Troy shook his head. "I think it's time you get that toy." Troy's eyes widened. "Really?" Will nodded. "Come on." They walked together to the superhero aisle. Will picked up the Mega Falcon toy and handed it to Troy. "This belongs to you now," he said. Troy held it close to his chest, his face full of joy and disbelief. "Thank you so much." Will looked back at the store manager. "Give him anything else he wants, on me." The manager nodded quickly. "Of course, Mr. Smith, absolutely." Cliffhanger, but Will wasn't done. He turned to the crowd and said, Troy held the Mega Falcon toy tightly in his hands. His eyes were wide, his heart beating fast. He still couldn't believe what just happened. 1 minute he was being told to leave. The next he was standing beside Will Smith, holding the toy of his dreams. But Will wasn't finished. He stood tall in the center of the store and looked at everyone. "This moment is important," Will said, his voice loud and clear. "Not just because this boy got his toy, but because the way we treat people matters." The crowd was quiet, listening closely. Will continued, "Too many kids feel invisible. They walk into stores, schools, or streets, and people look at them like they don't belong. But let me tell you something. They do belong, and we need to do better." The store manager nodded quickly, trying to show he agreed. Will turned to Troy. "Now let's give you something more than a toy." Troy looked confused. "More?" Will smiled. "You said Mega Falcon helps people, right?" Troy nodded. "Well, I want you to help me do something." He took out his phone again and made a quick call. "Yeah, it's me. Bring the van around." Troy looked up. "A van," Will winked. "You'll see." A few minutes later, a black van pulled up outside the toy store. It had a big white logo that said, WS Foundation. The doors opened, and inside were boxes and boxes of toys. The crowd gasped. Every year, Will explained, we give away toys to kids who don't have much. This time, Troy's going to help us do that. Troy's mouth dropped open. Me? Yes, you, Will said. You know what it feels like to want something and not have it. That makes you the perfect person to help others. Miss Karen peeked out from the back of the store, watching nervously. Will turned to the crowd. Anyone who wants to help, meet us outside in 5 minutes. We're taking these toys to kids who need them. The customers started clapping. Some even cheered. Troy looked around. People were smiling at him now. They weren't ignoring him or judging him. They were looking at him like he mattered. Will kneeled down again. You see, Troy, sometimes the world tries to make people feel small. But when you stand up, when you stay kind, even when it's hard, you become bigger than the world expects. Troy nodded. His eyes filled with tears again. But this time, they were happy tears. Will gave him a warm smile. Let's go help some heroes. The workers brought out more toy boxes from the back. The store manager, still trying to save face, offered free wrapping paper and bags. Even some customers donated extra toys from their carts. Miss Karen stayed in the shadows, watching everything. Her face was red. She didn't say a word. Outside, the street was filled with people. Kids from nearby schools had heard the news. Parents showed up with their children. News reporters arrived with cameras. Troy and Will stood together by the van. Will handed him a toy to give to the first child in line. Go on, he whispered. Troy took the toy and gave it to a small girl. With curly hair, she smiled brightly. Thank you, she said. Troy smiled back. For the first time in a long time, he felt proud. The line kept growing. Will and Troy gave away toy after toy, spreading joy with every box. But then, someone stepped out of the crowd. A man in a suit. He looked serious. He walked up to Will and whispered something in his ear. Will's smile faded slightly. He nodded, then turned to Troy. Hey, buddy. Something just came up. I need to tell you something. The sun was starting to set outside the toy store. Troy stood near the van, handing out the last few toys to happy children. Each smile made his heart feel lighter. It was the best day of his life. But then Will Smith walked toward him with a different look, gentle but serious. Hey, Troy, he said softly. Can we talk for a minute, just you and me? Troy nodded, feeling nervous. He followed Will to the side, away from the crowd. They sat on a small bench outside the store. Will looked at him carefully. Do you remember your mom, Troy? Troy's smile faded. He looked down. She left a long time ago, he whispered. I never met my dad. I live with Miss Carol now. She's nice, but I don't know why my parents didn't want me. Will nodded slowly, his voice calm. Troy, I didn't come to that store by accident today. Troy looked up, confused. Will reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an old photo. He handed it to Troy. Troy stared at it. It was a woman, young, smiling, holding a baby. She looked a little like him. That's your mom, Will said softly. Troy's eyes widened. You knew her? Will took a deep breath. Yes, she was my friend a long time ago. Before you were born. Troy blinked, trying to understand. But why do you have this picture? Will looked down for a second, then back at Troy. Because she sent it to me, before she passed away. Troy's heart dropped. She's gone? Will nodded slowly. She got sick. She didn't have family who could take care of you. At the time, she tried everything to keep you safe. She asked Miss Carol to raise you. But before she left this world, she sent me this. And a letter. Troy's hands shook as he held the photo. Why didn't you come before? Will's voice was quiet. I didn't know where you were. The system moved you around. I searched, but it took time. When I finally found out, I came right away. Troy looked up. But why? You're Will Smith. Why do you care? Will reached out and gently placed a hand on Troy's shoulder. Because your mom saved my life once, he said. Years ago, before I was famous. I was young and broke and had nothing. I was about to give up. But she believed in me. She gave me food when I had none. She told me to keep going. Will smiled softly, and she told me, "One day when you make it, promise me you'll help someone else who needs it." That someone was you. Troy couldn't speak. His throat felt tight. His eyes filled with tears. "I wish I could have met her," he whispered. Will nodded. "She would be proud." "Are you so proud?" They sat in silence for a moment. Then Will reached into his pocket again, and this time he pulled out a small box. He handed it to Troy. Troy slowly opened it. Inside was a chain with a small silver star. Engraved on it were the words, "Shine even in the dark." It was hers, Will said. "And now, it's yours." Troy held the necklace tightly in his hand. He didn't know what to say, but deep inside, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. A sense of belonging. Just then, Miss Carroll came walking quickly from across the parking lot. She looked shocked to see Troy with Will Smith. "Troy, what's going on?" she asked. Will stood and smiled kindly. "Hi, you must be Carol. I've been looking forward to meeting you." She blinked, confused. Are you really Will Smith?" He nodded. "I wanted to thank you for taking care of Troy." Miss Carroll smiled gently. "He's a good boy, special even." Will looked at Troy and nodded. "Yes, very special." Miss Carroll stood speechless as Will Smith smiled warmly at her. Troy still held the silver star necklace in his hand, his heart full of feelings he couldn't explain. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like just a kid from nowhere. He felt seen, he felt loved. Will turned to both of them. "I have one more surprise," he said. Troy looked up. "More?" Will nodded. "This one's big. Come with me." They walked together to the back of the store where a small crowd was still gathered. The van was empty now. All the toys had been given out, but now, parked next to it, was a shiny black SUV. A woman stepped out. She wore a business suit and held a briefcase. Will introduced her. "This is Vanessa. She works with my foundation. We help families in need, especially children with no parents." Vanessa smiled kindly. "Hi, Troy. We've heard a lot about you." Troy smiled shyly. Will continued. "Today I saw something powerful. A boy who stayed kind even when people were unfair. A boy who gave to others even when he had nothing. That kind of heart, it deserves the world." He paused, then added, "So here's what we're going to do." Will pulled out a thick envelope and handed it to Miss Carroll. She opened it slowly and gasped. Inside were legal documents. "This is a house," she said, shocked. "A real house. In our name?" Will nodded. "A safe home. Fully paid. It's close to a good school. Troy won't ever have to move again." Troy's mouth fell open. "A real house?" Will smiled. "Yes, your own room, a backyard, no more moving from place to place." Troy ran forward and hugged Will tightly. Thank you so much." Miss Carroll had tears in her eyes. "You have no idea what this means." But just as everyone began to cheer, a loud voice shouted from behind, "Wait a minute, that boy belongs to me." Everyone turned around. A rough-looking man stood near the parking lot. He wore dirty jeans, a wrinkled shirt, and had a sour look on his face. "I'm his father," the man yelled. "You can't just give my son away like that." Troy froze. "Miss," Carol stepped in front of him. You left him years ago," the man growled. "I'm still his blood. I want custody." Will stepped forward, calm but firm. "You walk in now, after years of silence, because you saw him on the news? That's not love, that's selfish." The man pointed angrily. "You think money makes you his family?" "I have rights," Vanessa stepped in. "Actually, you don't." She opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. "You signed your rights away 4 years ago. You left the state. You never visited. No support, no letters, nothing." The man's face turned red. "I want money then," he shouted. Will stepped up close. And now we know the truth. He looked at the man calmly. You're not here for Troy. You're here for yourself. But Troy is not a prize. He's a person, a strong, kind, brave person. And he deserves better than this. 2 security guards quietly walked up behind the man and asked him to leave. The crowd stayed quiet as he was taken away. Troy stood beside Miss Carroll, holding her hand tightly. He looked up at Will. Are we safe now? Will nodded. Yes, you are. Vanessa handed Troy a small box. Inside was a key. Will smiled. This is the key to your new home. Troy looked at it, then at Will. Why did you do all this for me? Will looked him in the eyes. Because someone once believed in me when no one else did. Now it's my turn to believe in you. Troy hugged him again, tighter this time. The cameras, the crowd, the toys, all of it faded. At that moment, it was just a boy. Finally seen. Finally safe. Finally loved.